This message is brought to you by donotage.org, the longevity research organisation that's on a mission to extend health span for as many people as possible via products that actually work. Start your journey today at donotage.org and use code LLAMA for a 10% discount. That's LLAMA.
Longevity is a beautiful symphony. You know, it's like a perfect balanced jigsaw where you need the right amount of pieces in the right combination.
Hello and welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast. I'm Peter Bowes. This is where we explore the science and stories behind human longevity. Now, for all of the years that I've been interested in this subject, writing about it, making documentaries, podcasts, even taking part in clinical trials myself as a human guinea pig, the work of Luigi Fontana has been a constant source of information and inspiration. Dr. Fontana is a physician, author and professor of medicine and nutrition at the University of Sydney in Australia. He is one of the world's leading experts in the mechanisms involved in healthy aging, preventative medicine, nutrition, fasting in all of its forms, cancer biology, and the ever-fascinating subject of the gut microbiome. All of which, and much more, he covers in his new book, The Path to Longevity, The Secrets to Living a Long, Happy, Healthy Life. Professor Fontana, it's a huge pleasure to welcome you to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Really good to talk to you. How is it in Sydney today?
No, Sydney is we were very lucky with the COVID. You know, we had very, very few cases, and so far so good. The weather is beautiful, even if it's winter here. It's a very mild winter, you know, so it's really nice place of the world, you know. Australia is beautiful, yeah. It
is beautiful. I've only visited Australia once, and I loved Sydney, if only for the coffee, but for many other reasons as well. It's a beautiful place. And, of course, you've lived around the world. You've worked here in the United States. You were born in Italy, and that's where you trained as a doctor.
Exactly. I trained as a doctor in Italy. I did my residency in Italy. I spent 1 year in London at the King's College. And then, you know, I did most of my PhD in US at Washington University in St. Louis, where I worked for 17 years. Before I came here to Australia.
And the move to Australia, with your experience around the world, and especially here in the States, did you notice a difference maybe in the profession, in research, in science, a difference in attitude from the Australians to perhaps what you were used to in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, every country, you know, has its own differences, cultural differences, and I think Australia is more like Europe, where, you know, we have an idea that, you know, people should have access to free healthcare and free education. And therefore, if someone is losing his or her job, you know, they still have access to good healthcare. And that's why I think is one of the reasons why I decided to move back, you know, to kind of more European philosophical approach where, you know, the wealthy people, the more smart people, they are contributing heavily to help, you know, to have, you know, that so everybody has, you know, some basic rights that it's like health. And, you know, one of the issues with US is that, you know, most of the research and health care that I like to call sick care, because really, you know, the approach is do whatever you want, eat, smoke, drink, and then, you know, when you are sick, you come to us and, you know, we are gonna do the best, you know, personalized medicine. You know, I like this term that, you know, everybody's using, personalized medicine. And then, you know, we're going to find the best drug, the best medication for you to treat your disease. In some way, it's like, you know, if you say to a citizen, look, you know, you buy your car, you drive your car without knowing anything about it, you know, without changing your tires, without changing your your brake pads, without changing your oil. And then you wait, for the accident to happen. And once the accident is occurring, then, we're going to come, with the best, ambulance, to see, to get you and, to see, how bad is the damage, and then, we're going to try to fix the damage, in the best way we can. And I think, that's crazy and is unsustainable. It's unsustainable because, it's impossible to provide health care for everybody in these conditions, because the accident are going to be, in some ways, like the COVID, if you don't flatten the curve, basically, if you don't reduce the risk of people getting sick, the system is going to be overwhelmed. And, look at now what happens in US, it's, 70+% of population is overweight or obese. There are now some countries where 43%, in Louisiana, 43% of the citizens are obese, not overweight, obese. I mean, you have to be a genius, to understand, with this rate of obesity, especially in kids, the number of chronic diseases is going to explode, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, and fatty liver disease leading to cirrhosis and liver cancer, you name it. Basically, among probably between 60 to 80% of, the common disease we see in our hospital are due to unhealthy lifestyle, for many, many years of unhealthy lifestyle. And therefore, if you have this type of, lifestyle, that is typical of America, but unfortunately not of America anymore, the consequences are clear. At least they are clear to me. That is going to be, that wealthy people, they're going to afford, the best hospitals, and the people, the middle class and the poor people, they're going to be, on their own.
So just going back to that analogy then that you made of the engine that isn't cared for, we are all in huge numbers, certainly a majority of populations, just that accident waiting to happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Basically, it's not if, it's when and how bad it's going to be. Based on your genetic background, based on your age, based on different conditions, you're going to have one accident, and then the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. In fact, many of the people, they take 10, 15 medication as they get older. These medication, they are causing problems they have side effects, and so they cause other problems. And it's crazy because we know, as I explained in my book, that, we can minimize. The risk is it will never be zero. Okay. So it's impossible in biology to have a zero risk. It's like, if you change your tire, if you take care of your engine, the risk is never zero. It can happen, but the risk is much lower. Much lower. That's why, we do everything. That's why, we change our tire, we change our, brake pads, we take care of our car, because we know, we are going to drastically minimize the risk. And that's what, a healthy society should do. So a healthy society should teach kids, teenagers, so primary, secondary, tertiary school, they should teach, what I try to explain in my book. Because it's not something that you can learn, just by reading, a book once. It's like, if you ask, an engineer or a doctor or a violin player, say, can you give me like a short answer, like, something easy to master so, I can become a professional violinist or an engineer able to design a bridge or an airplane. No, it takes many, many years of studying, mastering, experimenting, and then, eventually you become a good doctor, a good engineer, a good violinist, a good pianist, and unfortunately, we teach our kids, to do math, to do gram, to do, many other things. But, we don't teach the most important stuff, how to take care of yourself.
Well, that's what you talk about in the book. It is a wonderful read, and you cover all the different pillars of longevity, nutrition, exercise, what I would describe as matters of the mind, the spiritual side of our lives. And at one point in the book, you write, living longer by itself is of no importance to me. And I thought we'd start there, because I assume what you're referring to there is what I often talk about, and that is health span is much more important than lifespan.
Yes, that's one point. Health span, of course, is much more important than lifespan, because that's what's happening right now because of the major advances. So don't get me wrong, what we did in the last 100 years in terms of medicine is fantastic. So basically, surgery and diagnostic and vaccines and blood transfusion. People that don't understand, how life was only 100 years ago. The average lifespan was 35 years. If you had, basically an infection, like a bronchitis becoming a pneumonitis, your chance of dying was 50%. Only after World War II, we discovered antibiotics, and now, you can treat a disease if you have a major trauma. If you have surgery with antibiotics, you can, get rid of bacteria that eventually are going to kill you. So again, don't get me wrong, what we did in medicine is fantastic. Is how we use this knowledge that is wrong. Because, because the risk is not zero. If, I have an accident, then I want to have access to this fantastic medicine. But, like for COVID, we have to reduce the number of people accessing these hospitals, so that, people, so that, they're going to be good care for everybody. And so they're going to be free health care for everybody, because the numbers are very low. And so, we can afford, to have free health care if people that they are taking care of themselves. But apart from that, I think, there is another concept apart from health span. The other concept is that, I think, our body, having a healthy body, is just an instrument for our inner self to grow and experience. I think, our life is a beautiful journey. It's a fantastic journey if you think about it. You're born in this beautiful planet. You can experience, you can have lots of friends. You have a beautiful family. You can travel. You can change work. You can try to understand who you are and express the best of yourself, because each one of us has different strengths, and if we can really understand who we are, if we can find harmony, if we can find balance, then, we can enjoy this life. Of course, there are bad times in life, but these are, if we are strong, we can cope, we can learn how to live with this problem, and we can grow, because it's during difficult times that people normally, they meditate and they grow and they become better human beings. And so I think, again, I see, sometimes a lot of obsession, with building muscle mass and, being lean or living longer, just for the sake of living longer. But I don't understand, if living longer is gonna, for example, damage the planet, what's the point? Let's say, this high animal protein diet, there's some people on the paleo or now the keto, they are proposing as the solution for the epidemic of obesity. That, we know from multiple data, from animal data, from molecular data, from epidemiological data, from randomized clinical trials that are unhealthy. But let's say, they are healthy. Let's, imagine they are healthy. But for the single human being. But if this excessive consumption of animal products is destroying the planet, because we know it does, because, this intensive animal farming, think about, in US, there are 300 million plus people. In China, 1.3, 1.4 billion people. If each one of these persons is going to eat meat like, Americans do, the planet is over. It's already over, because, the 15% of global warming is due to intensive animal farming. There is basically the huge consumption of land. We are destroying topsoil. to grow all these feeding, corn and soy for feeding billions of animals that every day are killed. And there is antibiotic resistance. There is water overconsumption. In California, basically, the aquifers are almost depleted, because we are extracting so much fresh water. And so people, they don't realize that, what we do it has an impact that is on a planetary. It's not only just you. You have to think about you in relation with nature, with the planet, with the sustainability. And I don't think people, they realize. And, this COVID is just an example of what can happen just, because a virus is starting to travel around, But what happens, with global warming? People, they don't realize, the global warming is coming.
So you're not about just living and living and living for living's sake, but you are about living as healthy as we can for let's just say a reasonable number of years. And that's why I use the phrase health span, not to obsess on living forever or even living to be 120. Maybe 90 or 100 would be great, as long as we're contributing to society and we are of value to our families and we are, above all, for our own benefits, we are healthy. So the goal is to try to achieve that. Some people will say, well, let's live and let live. Okay, some people might have the longevity gene that allows them somehow to get to that great age. But through reading your book, I see one of the things that you point out is that the longevity gene, whatever that is perhaps less significant than we think.
Yeah. So if we look at the data from multiple sources, approximately 25%. So these are the studies in identical twins. Okay. So these basically are homozygous twins. And the data are suggesting that no more than 25% of the probability of living a long or short life are due to inherited genes. 75% is due to environmental factors. And even in centenarians, there are studies from Tom Prols in Boston and Sebastiani, Dr. Sebastiani. Even in family of centenarians, probably 40%, not more, is due to genes. The rest is due to environmental factors. And the beauty that, is that, we are discovering that aging is not a wear and tear process, is highly regulated. There are some metabolic and molecular pathways that are regulating the accumulation of damage. So that's the beauty of science. We have dissected by doing, molecular experiments where we knock down genes or overexpress genes, and now we understand, there are certain pathways, like, for example, the insulin IGF-1 mTOR pathway. That is one of these nutrient sensing pathways. So basically, our cells are able to understand how much nutrients and proteins are available for growth and reproduction, and they are able to twist and modulate, the accumulation of damage. And then there are many other ones that, inflammatory cytokines and catecholamines and angiotensin, that, we can trick with lifestyles, and therefore, we can, improve this lifespan, and therefore reducing our risk of developing diseases and getting frail and, taking multiple medications, getting in and out of hospitals, pain and suffering. But people, they don't know, and they are looking for the magic fix. There are a lot of people out there, they are selling, the magic recipe. It can be a drug, it can be a food or something. And to me, it's crazy. It's like, I don't know. I mean, sometimes, when I see, that, there are people who have millions of followers just, because they have, a simple magic bullet, for a complex problem. I'm appalled of how people can believe that. I don't understand.
And we'll continue this conversation in just a moment.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we are the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
Now, you are probably best known for your work on, certainly in the area of nutrition, but specifically on fasting. And you write and you point out that the fasting or calorie restriction is the most powerful intervention to slow aging. And before we delve into that, I just want to talk a little bit about Roy Walford, who you were inspired by in the early part of your career. Roy Walford was one of the first, at least one of the main characters of his era to talk about calorie restriction. And he was based here in Los Angeles at UCLA. I met him in the late 1990s briefly to do an interview, which is just a few years before he died. What was so inspiring about him and his work for you?
Look, I talked with Roy probably a few months before he died. He called me one day. I was in my office in St. Louis, and he called me and he said, "Luigi, I'm Roy Walford." I said, "Hi, Roy." And he said, "Look, I want to thank you because, you are doing fantastic research on calorie restriction. As you know, I've been working many, many years on mice and calorie restriction, and the work you are doing is fantastic. I'm really thankful, that, you are doing this work." And it was like we talked for half an hour. And it was really, really nice. It's and then I'm a good friend with his daughter, Lisa. And I think, they are a fantastic family, very open, very progressive. And as you know, Roy, basically did this lot, many of the most important papers on calorie restriction in mice are coming out of his lab. Richard Weindruck was one of his postdoc, and then, he became an influential, scientist on mice and monkeys. There are two monkeys, CR monkey studies. One is one of Richard, who is, again, a good friend. And so I started, to work on calorie restriction because when I was a medical student, one of our professor, his name is Ottavio Bosello, he's a geriatrician. He told us during the class, the geriatric class about, the calorie restriction effects in mice. And I said, "Oh, wow." So what I've been studying for years, because, as a teenager, I have an uncle who is a scholar in traditional Chinese medicine and, Indian yoga, all this stuff. And so I've always been raised, with this idea of a holistic approach, preventative approach to health. And so I went through medical school, with this idea of looking at the big picture. I knew I didn't want to become a heart failure specialist or a breast cancer oncologist. I need, my mind needs to be to look at the big picture. I'm not able to function, in a very super specialized, sector of medicine. And so when he told me, he told us about this beautiful data, about these CR mice data, extending lifespan and health span, I said, wow, fantastic. So basically, it does exist in nature, a biological program that can extend lifespan and health span and drastically reduce many chronic disease. And so once I finished my residency, and I did 1 year of residency in London, doing research on endothelial function, I started to look into who was working on calorie restriction in humans. I wrote an email to Richard Weindruck, and he told me, "Look, Luigi, I'm working only in mice, so I'm not working in humans." But John Holliday at Washington University, he just got a grant to study the effects of calorie restriction in humans. Why you don't write to him? So I wrote to John, and John told me, "Why you don't come and join my lab?" And so I did my luggage. I left Italy and I went there and I worked with John for 17 years. And I don't know if you know, John Holosy is one of the pioneers of exercise physiology. He won the gold medal at the Sydney Olympic Games in 2000 as a recognition for his discovery, exercise physiology, and $500,000 prize. And so it has been an honor and a beautiful adventure to work with him and talk with him. We were best friends, apart from, doing great science together, we were talking about anything, philosophy, life. And so it's been beautiful. And, I was blessed, to work with such a great man and having collaboration with Richard Weindruck and many other top scientists in the field of longevity, understanding longevity and how we can live a long life, but most importantly, a healthy life, as we said.
Now, as we come up to the present day and you talk about calorie restriction, I think the thing that most people would immediately think of is intermittent fasting, which has really taken off over the last few years. And of course, there are various forms of fasting. There's the 5-2 diet, which I know a lot of your research basically went into the creation of the 5-2 diet. And we're talking there in terms of days, the 5 and the 2 representing days of the week. But then there are 16-8 diets, and we're talking about hours here. We're getting into time-restricted eating. Some people do 23-1, and it's more extreme. There are fasting mimicking diets of the kind that Walter Longo at USC has developed, all under this umbrella of intermittent fasting, which increasingly, to me, and I look into this, but increasingly is confusing because all of those regimes are actually very different, aren't they?
Yeah, you're right. Right now, there is a big push, a big commercial push and media push about, these fasting, different type of fasting regimens. And this is based on data from animal models, okay? And the data on animal models are really interesting. Even if, if you look at the survival curves, fasting is not as powerful as chronic calorie restriction without malnutrition. There is a significant effect, but it's not as powerful. But there is a problem. And the problem is that, a lot of biologists, a lot of PhDs assume that, mice and humans are the same. They are not, unfortunately. Mice live 2.5 years. Humans live 80 years. I'm talking on average. And mice, they don't develop atherosclerosis. That is the first cause of death, even if you feed them a high-fat diet. Mice, the type of cancer are completely different. But most importantly, after 2 days of fasting, most strains of mice die. So 48 hours of fasting is lethal. Human beings, even people lean like me, they can go for a month without eating. So when we look at the data of, for example, intermittent fasting, where animals, they are fasting 24 hours and then feeding 24 hours, this is not like 24 hours for a human being, because probably 1 day of fasting for a mice is probably like 5 or 6 days of fasting in a human being. So, what I think, we have been studying so far is like doing for the entire life, 5 days of feeding, 5 days of fasting, 5 days of feeding, 5 days of fasting. And even for the time-restricted feeding, the data, for example, from Panda in California, 12 hours of fasting for mice is not overnight fasting for humans. Probably 12 hours fasting is like probably 3 or 4 days of fasting in a human being. And we know, for example, if you fast for 5 days, your IGF-1 drops by 50-60%. 1 day of fasting, probably 10%. So, the signal is not there.
Just for people coming to IGF-1 and you, yeah. I know I've actually talked about it a lot, and having done the fasting mimicking diet, I know exactly what that kind of diet will do to my IGF-1. But just could you explain what the insulin growth factor 1 is?
So basically, there are many growth factors. The most important ones is probably IGF-1 and insulin, because, insulin and IGF-1, they are binding to the insulin and IGF-1 receptors that every single cells of our organism have. And insulin and IGF-1, they're like brother and sister, meaning that, insulin can bind to IGF-1 receptor with low affinity, and vice versa, IGF-1 can bind to the insulin receptor with low affinity. And when insulin and IGF-1, they are binding to this receptor, they are stimulating a pathway, it's called the PI3-AKT pathway, that is inhibiting FOXO and mTOR, that are two of the most important transcriptional factors for longevity, because when you have low FOXO and high mTOR, because insulin and IGF-1 are binding to the receptor, you are inhibiting autophagy, you are inhibiting DNA repair, you are inhibiting antioxidant pathways, you are inhibiting apoptosis, and you are pushing cell proliferation. You are stimulating cell proliferation, increasing random mutations leading to cancer and cell senescence. So multiple data from dietary, genetic, and now pharmacological with rapamycin have clearly shown that, this pathway is a key pro-longevity, anti-cancer, anti-aging pathway. So there is no doubt about it. So we don't know in humans how important it is, but, based on many epidemiological data, higher IGF-1 is linked, with increased risk of breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer. So we know that, this stimulation of IGF-1 is driving cancer, and anything that drives cancer drives aging. There is no doubt about it. So again, IGF-1 is an important factor. I have published, that, for example, people on a kind of vegetarian diet, with the right amount of calories, they have lower IGF-1 levels. But calorie restriction, for example, in humans by itself is not lowering IGF-1, even if it's increasing IGF binding protein 1. I haven't published the data yet, but we have data, showing, that the IGF-BP1 is hugely increased by calorie restriction, and so more IGF-BP1 means less bioavailable IGF-1. But it's very technical. So the message is that, when we do fasting, it's not like fasting in mice, because of these different metabolic. So mice, rats, they have a very high metabolic rate. And again, after 2 days of fasting, they die. And so, you cannot assume that, 1 day of fasting in humans is similar to 1 day of fasting in animals. But most importantly, what I can see with a 5-2 diet or other type of diets is that, people, they assume that, if they fast, then in the non-fasting period, they can do whatever they want. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. If you're eating junk in the non-fasting days and you expect that, you're going to live longer because of that, bad news. You're not going to do that.
And that also applies to people doing a 16-8 diet or
exactly.
even a 23-1.
Yeah.
What you eat during that eating window is all important.
Exactly, because, you are changing your gut microbiome, you are changing, you are providing the building blocks of your cells. So if you think, that, you are going to, eat junk, highly processed, refined food, as much as you want in the non-fasting days, or even if you do calorie restriction doesn't mean eating half hamburger, half pack of French fries, and half soda. That's not calorie restriction. That's calorie restriction with malnutrition. This is going to kill you. So again, as I try to convey in my book, is that, longevity is a beautiful symphony. It's like a perfect balanced jigsaw where you need the right amount of pieces in the right combination. It's like, if you have colors, because you have a lot of colors, doesn't mean you're going to able to paint a beautiful paintings. You have to have the right balance, and that's why you have people like Picasso, Matisse, or Modigliani, or Van Gogh, who, with the same colors that everybody has available, can do the right mix. And this idea that, basically, I like red, and so I'm going to use a lot of red. No, it doesn't work like that. It's like, I like violins. So in an orchestra, I'm going to have, 80 violins. No, it doesn't work like that. The symphony is not going to be nice if you're overusing, violins. Or it's like, to make a more simple analogy, it's like if you say, okay, the wheels of a car are important. Instead of having 4 wheels, I'm going to have 20 wheels. No, it doesn't work like that. You need the right amount of wheels, to be efficient, not too many.
So just going back to my original thought of there being several different fasting regimes or time-restricted eating or fasting mimicking diet, all of these things that people are aware of and doing, and people evangelize over a certain diet over another. From your knowledge of fasting, is there one particular regime that you believe to be better than the others? Or is the fact that we are all different meaning that there is no clear answer to that question, and that one diet might suit one person, another might suit another?
Yes, I think that, we have to move into something different. And it is, we should start to develop biomarkers that are going to measure on me, not on you, the response to different interventions, so that people can start to experiment, on which is the best cocktail of interventions that are going to keep these biomarkers under control. So the first biomarker, everybody can measure is waist circumference. Because, basically, as I said in my book, it's not just body weight. You can be very lean, but, if you have low muscle mass and you have basically an increased waist circumference, if you have an excessive deposition of fat in your abdomen, it means you are in a chronic energy balance, positive energy balance. And therefore, you are producing pro-inflammatory cytokines, you are becoming insulin resistant, you secrete excess insulin, you are reducing IGF-BP1 and BP2 so that you have more bioavailable IGF-1. You have less steroid hormone binding globulin, so you have more bioavailable testosterone, estrogens. And all these factors are driving the accumulation of damage. They are inhibiting DNA repair. They are inhibiting autophagy. And all these factors that, we know are very important for health span and longevity. So I think, what I envision is that, we are going to develop a number of biomarkers that are more sensitive that waist circumference, where I can measure my insulin non-invasively, a few times a week, and I can decide, how much exercise and how much fasting or calorie restriction or different type of intervention I have to adjust to get basically the best results that fits myself. So that's the beauty, I think, of this biology of aging science, we are developing, and personally I'm developing in humans, because again, animals are extremely important to generate hypotheses. Without the animal experiments, I cannot understand which factors are important for mediating these anti-aging pathways. But then I have to test these hypotheses into humans, because mice and rats and worms and flies are not humans. And I think, we are getting there, but people, first of all, they have to understand what is doing what. Because right now I see religions. I see people who are vegans and people who are paleo, people who are keto, people who are into high exercise. They are killing themselves by running 60, 70, 80 miles a week, thinking, because they are lean, because they are running, they're going to be healthy. So there is a lot of misconceptions. And I think, let's get out of religions. Let's get out of, it's not like Milan versus Juventus or, it's understanding the mechanisms. Once you understand the mechanisms, then, and you have the biomarkers, then, you have the knowledge and instruments to regulate your health and your parameters, to optimize them according to who you are, what are your genes, what is your part of your life, what you want to achieve. Otherwise, it's just, fiction. It's just, to me, it's like, buy my product, because, for X reason, so I love animals. I'm a hunter-gatherer. I'm pro-fasting, anti-fasting. It's really discouraging, and there is a lot of business around, and I don't like that, I think, it's getting messy, and money is more important than knowledge.
So you mentioned exercise, you mentioned religion. I think exercise to some people is a religion, whether it's running those ultra marathons or it's working out in the gym 7 days a week. But exercise is hugely important. And you talk in the book about physical activity, or I guess the lack of physical activity, being the biggest public health problem of the 21st century.
Yeah, there is no doubt. Exercise is one of the instruments. As I said, and let me reiterate that, longevity is a puzzle. There, you need a lot of different pieces, and exercise is one of the many pieces. You have to take care if you want to live a long and healthy life. But again, we need to understand what exercise does and what different type of exercise do on different metabolic, molecular, and physiological parts of our body. Again, just to tell you, something, that I think is interesting. John Holliday, that, as I said, before, it was, one of the most important pioneer in exercise physiology. He was not interested in calorie restriction. He became interested in calorie restriction because at one point of his life, he did an experiment because he wanted to test, he wanted to prove that, exercise had anti-aging effects. So he said, let me do an experiment where, I study animals, rats that are exercising. He trained these animals to run on a wheelchair, and basically, and so he had a control sedentary group. Then he had, an exercising group. And then he said, look, I want to have a third group that has the same body weight than the exercising animals. And so, how can I get, a group who is lean, similar to the exercising, by doing calorie restriction? So the third group were animals who were sedentary, but, restricted, 30% restricted to have the same body weight of the exercising animals. With his great surprise, that's what he told me, the results were that, exercise was extending average lifespan, but not maximal lifespan. Instead of calorie restriction, was extending both average and maximal lifespan. And he did this experiment twice with like 100 animals per group. So it was a big experiment because back then, the cost of animals were much, much less than now. And again, he found, and again, that even if the exercising animals, they had more muscle mass, less body fat, they were more insulin sensitive, they did not live longer. They were healthier, so they had an increase in average lifespan, but not an anti-aging effect, by slowing down aging and increasing maximal lifespan. And so, with John, we talk a lot about it. And the idea was, basically calorie restriction is like a low energy flux status, and exercise is high energy flux status, where, you have a lot of energy, a lot of substrates going into your cells and, be turned on, through mitochondria to the Krebs cycles. And again, that's probably not the best way, to live longer. Exercise is important in the right amount. So you want to exercise because you want to stimulate the GLUT4, the mitochondria biogenesis. There are a number of factors, the BDNF, there are a number of factors that are stimulated by exercise that calorie restriction does not. Okay. But by itself is not the solution to a long and healthy life.
And in fact, you point out in the book that athletes don't necessarily live particularly long lives. They might focus on their physical strength or their physical ability to run faster than anyone else or to play football or to play whatever the sport of choice is in their younger years, extremely fit people you would think, but it doesn't seem to affect their longevity.
No. They of course it improves their health, the general health, but they, even Olympians, they don't live, probably they live a couple of years younger than longer than the average, but they are not really long lived, like some the Okinawans or the Sardinians or other people who are doing it's a balance of diet and exercise and other factors, including cognitive training and mindfulness and the mind.
Well, let's turn to that. Let's turn to mindfulness, nurturing our minds. And one of the things you write about is the importance of sleep, which I think we all get how crucially important that is, and exposing ourselves to what you call pink noise. What's pink noise?
There are accumulating data suggesting that pink noise is like if you are close to a waterfall or to the ocean, there are these this kind of repetitive noise that they have a certain frequencies, like the rain falling, the waterfall, the ocean waves, and these looks like he has an effect in changing how our electrical waves of our brain are functioning. They are stimulating more deep waves. They are similar to the one we have when we are sleeping very deeply, and during this deep phase 3 sleep, the data are suggesting basically our brain is cleaning up. There is a cleaning up of the garbage, that we accumulate during the day. There is less inflammation. There is a reduction in production of beta amyloid and tau, who are promoting dementia. So there are many interesting things going on, and most importantly, during the night when we sleep deeply, we are fixing our memories. We transfer what we have learned during the day from the RAM memory into the hard disk of our brain. So that's why it's very important for kids, and not only for kids, to sleep well, because if you want to be productive and creative, if you want to consolidate the memories the experience you had during the day, is very important to sleep.
Another aspect of mindfulness is our attitude towards other people, how we associate socially with other people, our viewpoint on life, our mindset. And you talk about the Okinawans of Japan having a sort of don't worry about everything, it's going to be fine kind of attitude, a kind of relaxed Zen-like attitude towards life, which you argue is, I don't know in terms of equal to exercise or diet, but certainly is a significant aspect of how we conduct our lives and the effect that it can have on how long we'll live.
Yeah, I mean, we are starting just to scratch the importance of the metabolic molecular importance of, the stress and negative emotions. We are not very good, scientifically, we don't have, strong techniques, and it's very difficult to design experiments, where you selectively study only the effects of, stress or joy or anger, but there are more and more data showing, anger and other negative emotions, stress, they have a very bad effect, because, for example, they activate the catecholaminergic pathways, norepinephrine, they increase cortisol, and these have very bad effects on longevity. We know that, the cortisol, catecholamine pathways, AC5 knockout mice, where you are basically, you are disrupting the catecholaminergic pathways, they live longer. So we know that, stress and this negative emotion through inflammatory catecholaminergic cortisol pathways, they are deleterious, at least chronic stress, because acute stress is good, but, chronic stress is bad. But, I think, there is another aspect about mindfulness, our approach to life, is that, what is coming out from science is that many of these misbehavior, people, they are overindulging in junk food or drugs or alcohol or sex, now internet, the Facebook and many other, social media, people, they're obsessed, they become addicted. And it looks like, that stress is an important component, because if you are constantly stressed, because you are not being trained, to live a more mindful, more, to train your mind. The mind is like a muscle. We know, everybody knows, if you want to become stronger, you have to exercise constantly to build muscle strength, muscle mass. The brain is the same. So if you constantly think negatively, basically you are stimulating the plasticity of your brain. You're building synapses that are going to reinforce this negative emotion or these negative behaviors. Instead of, if you are training your mind by doing activities, it's like, if I keep playing piano, or if I keep playing tennis, if I keep surfing, eventually I'm going to get better. Why I'm going to get better? Because I build synapses that are going to allow me to do that movement or that behavior, in a automatic way. It's like, when you drive a car, you don't think about, driving the car. You jump in the car and you drive. At the beginning, instead of when you are learning, you have to think what you're doing. Okay, so it's the same for everything. If you look, a pianist playing, I don't know, like a long concert, sometimes you say, wow, how can he remember all these notes, and doing perfectly? Because he builds synapses in his brain. And so I think the same happens for happiness, for joy, for serenity, for kindness, for many other behavioral, emotional factors. If we keep working on that, they become automatic, they become part of ourselves. And then we are going to become better human beings, more creative, more successful in life, in our job. We're going to have a better emotional health. We're going to have stronger connection with our friends, with our colleagues. And so we're going to live a better life, a more high quality life than, if we are selfish, we are egoistic, we are excessively competitive. We have, we train our mind, in all these negative emotions that, they're going to lower the quality of our life. But as I said, the science is telling us that, many of these addictions are a response to chronic stress, to chronic negative emotion, because, if you are chronically stressed, you need some relief. And so then you can use alcohol, you can use sex, you can use food, just to have a short bout of dopamine to, to transiently reduce the stress. But then it's going to create an addiction, because, even if for a short time you are reducing the stress, then, you become dependent, like, drug addicts, like alcoholists on these, these dopamine shoot. And then, you're going to destroy your health, and you're going to basically compromise, your physical, metabolic, emotional, social life. And eventually you're going to also have an impact on the environmental health of this planet.
Yeah, I agree. That's really interesting. I want to end by quoting one line from your book, which has really stayed with me. You call it the stream of life. Each one of us is born in a precise place and historical time, bound to an intricate net of biological, cultural, social and religious worldviews. As soon as we are born, the journey in our unique little world unfolds. I'm just curious, how would you assess your journey so far?
Yeah, this is one of the part that I like the most, of my book. It's more my philosophical, because, as I said, I think, life is a beautiful experience. It's a gift, being born, in this world, be able, to make friends, for example, to meet you and discuss with you. It's enriching, it's beautiful. So, life is a beautiful journey. We have just to learn, like, we learn, to become anything in life. You have to learn from yourself. You have to walk and experience and enjoy, and learn how to understand what happens within you when you encounter, different experiences. We know that, the weather cannot always be nice. We know, that a storm is going to come. But, if you know that, a storm is going to come, you can prepare yourself and say, okay, tomorrow is going to rain. So, okay, tomorrow I'm going to stay home, or I'm going to do something where, I'm going to use my time in a way that, where, I can get the best of it. I'm not going to go out in the storm, with, flying stones or whatever, because I'm aware. Again, awareness, mindfulness, I'm aware, and I can use my time, I can balance my life to get the best of it, to become the best that I can, to become, to use my strength, my natural abilities to contribute to become a better human beings, to contribute to the society, to live in a better world. My problem is that, we have the knowledge right now to live in a fantastic world. We have the technological knowledge to drastically reduce chronic diseases. We have the knowledge to drastically reduce the use of fossil fuel. We have knowledge, to build houses that are completely energy efficient. My uncle in North Italy, he has a house, no heating system, no air conditioning. It's a class A plus house. He gets money every month, because he's producing energy in excess, because he doesn't need heat, he doesn't need air conditioning. So he does with the solar, his hot water, and, he's producing energy in excess. He's selling energy. And so we have knowledge now to build cars that are super energy efficient, and they, eventually, we're going to have cars that are going to drive on hydrogen. So producing basically vapor, instead of, pollutants. And so that's what is killing me. If as a global human beings, we would work together, we will use our energy, our knowledge, and we invest in the university, to develop, to integrate all this knowledge, we could live in a much better, more healthy, more happy, more kind, loving planet where people, instead of wasting their times to work long hours to pay very expensive healthcare systems, they have more time to enjoy their life, to do art, to do music, to travel, to enrich themselves. It will be a much better, more beautiful planet than, what we have created.
Luigi Fontana, if having a zest for life, an enthusiasm for life, like you obviously do, I think that's obviously a key part of longevity and aspiring to that health span as anything else that we've talked about.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time. It's a great book. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I recommend it. It's The Path to Longevity, The Secrets to Living a Long and Happy, Healthy Life. Luigi, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And I will put the details of the book into the show notes for this episode at our website, lamapodcast.com. That's LLAMA podcast.com. And if you listen to us through Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review there. I read them all. It's good to know what you think and perhaps what you'd like us to cover in the future. The LLAMA Podcast is a HealthSpan media production. You can follow us in social media at LLAMA Podcast. Direct message me at Peter Bowes. Many thanks for listening. Health optimization is what this podcast is all about, and that means taking care of our mitochondria, the energy centers of our cells. Physical strength, avoiding frailty is key, and that's why the science behind urolithin A and the work of Timeline Nutrition is so interesting. You can find out more and get a discount code at our website and in the show notes for this episode.